The atmosphere inside the cliff house was thick with an unbearable, suffocating tension, contrasting sharply with the rhythmic, peaceful crashing of the Malibu waves against the rocks below. For days, the pristine walls of their home had felt like a psychological prison for Steffy Forrester Finnegan. Every loving glance from her husband, John Finn Finnegan, every gentle touch, and every word of praise he offered regarding her unwavering honesty and purity felt like a physical blow to her conscience. Finn had been desperately trying to mend the fractures in their marriage, completely oblivious to the catastrophic reality that the foundation of their relationship had already been shattered into a million irreparable pieces. He believed their greatest obstacle was the looming, toxic shadow of his biological mother, Sheila Carter. He had no idea that the true destroyer of their peace was not Sheila, but Steffy herself, and the dark, passionate secret she harbored from one reckless night at Forrester Creations. The crushing weight of her guilt finally reached an absolute breaking point. As Finn stood before her, his eyes filled with a desperate, unconditional devotion, speaking softly about how they could overcome any obstacle as long as they had each other and the truth. The facade Steffy had meticulously maintained completely crumbled. She could no longer breathe through the lies. The memory of the Forrester CEO office, the intoxicating burn of the alcohol, the blinding grief over her perceived broken marriage, and the strong, comforting arms of Carter Walton all rushed back to her in a suffocating wave of self-loathing. Unable to endure the agonizing torment for a single second longer, Steffy's legs gave out beneath her. She collapsed to the hardwood floor, dropping to her knees at the feet of the man she adored, her body racked with violent, uncontrollable sobs that echoed through the silent house. Finn froze, his hands hovering in the empty air where his wife had just been standing. Confusion quickly morphed into sheer terror as he looked down at the broken woman weeping at his feet. He dropped to his knees beside her, his medical instincts and husbandly devotion kicking in simultaneously, frantically asking her what was wrong, begging her to let him help her. But the words that finally tumbled from Steffy's trembling lips were not a plea for medical assistance. They were a devastating, soul-crushing confession that stopped Finn's heart dead in its chest. Through her tears, her voice cracking with profound shame, Steffy confessed the unforgivable. She told him about the night she returned from Monaco, convinced their marriage was entirely over because of his secret pact with Sheila. She confessed to drinking until the pain blurred, and she confessed that in her darkest, most vulnerable moment of despair, she had crossed the ultimate line with Carter Walton. For a moment, time itself seemed to stand perfectly still within the cliff house. The world around Finn ceased to exist. The air was violently sucked from his lungs, and a deafening, high-pitched ringing filled his ears. His mind struggled to process the sheer magnitude of the betrayal. He had raced through the airport in Monaco, faced the volcanic, paternal wrath of Rich Forrester, and flown across the world entirely consumed by the desperate need to save his wife and his family. He had fought a relentless internal war regarding his complex feelings for Sheila, ultimately choosing Steffy above everyone and everything else. And yet, while he was fighting to salvage their future, she had already surrendered herself to another man. The image of his beautiful, fiercely loyal wife intertwined with Carter Walton, a man they both considered a close, trusted friend, flashed through his mind, burning a hole straight through his soul and shattering his masculine pride into jagged, bleeding shards. But the nightmare was far from over, and the deepest cut was yet to be delivered. As Finn sat paralyzed in a state of catatonic shock, Steffy forced herself to look into his devastated eyes. Her mascara was smeared, her face pale and contorted with a terror that went far beyond the fear of divorce. With a trembling hand resting instinctively against her lower abdomen, she delivered the final apocalyptic blow. She was pregnant. A new life was currently forming within her, and the timing, the circumstances, and the undeniable reality of biology pointed to a singular, devastating truth. The child growing inside the woman he worshipped belonged to Carter Walton. The revelation hit Finn with the force of a runaway freight train, completely obliterating any remaining semblance of reality. The psychological implications were staggering, twisting the knife of betrayal with a cruel, cosmic irony. Carter Walton, a man who had spent his entire adult life desperately yearning for a family of his own, a man whose own wife, Daphne Rose Walton, had just received a devastating, soul-crushing diagnosis of severe infertility and premature menopause, was now the biological father of Steffy's unborn child. While Daphne was drowning in functional depression, convinced she could never give Carter the child he dreamed of, Steffy was carrying that exact miracle. It was a ticking time bomb of unprecedented proportions, a secret so massive and explosive that its eventual detonation would not only destroy the sin marriage, but would completely annihilate Carter and Daphne's fragile reconciliation. A fierce, violent storm of conflicting emotions raged within Finn's chest. The primal, instinctual anger of a betrayed husband screamed at him to walk away, to leave this broken woman on the floor and never look back. His pride was decimated, his trust entirely eradicated. He had placed Steffy on an impossible pedestal of purity and righteousness, allowing her to dictate the terms of their lives and his relationship with his own mother, only to discover she was capable of a deception far more intimate and destructive than anything Sheila Carter had orchestrated in recent months. The betrayal was an absolute violation of every vow they had ever taken, a mockery of the sacred bond they shared. Yet, as Finn stared down at Steffy, his gaze shifted from the abstract horror of the betrayal to the visceral, heartbreaking reality of the woman kneeling before him. He saw the mother of his beloved son, Hayes, and his stepdaughter, Kelly. He saw the woman who had fought her way back to him from the brink of death, the woman who had endured unspeakable traumas and emerged stronger every time. But right now, she was not the invincible, fiery co-CEO of Forrester Creations. She was a terrified, shattered soul, completely consumed by remorse, waiting for the executioner's axe to fall on her family. She was looking at him not just for forgiveness, but for salvation. It was in this agonizing, suspended moment that the core of John Finnegan's character rose to the surface, eclipsing his shattered ego. Finn was, above all else, a healer. As a doctor, his life's purpose was to preserve life, to mend the broken, and to protect the vulnerable. As a father, his entire universe revolved around the safety, stability, and happiness of his children. The thought of Hayes and Kelly growing up in a broken home, the thought of the media circus, the scandalous headlines, and the absolute destruction of their family unit triggered a protective instinct so powerful, so overwhelming, that it drowned out the screaming voice of his wounded pride. He realized that walking away would not just punish Steffy. It would punish innocent children, including the unborn life currently forming in the womb of the woman he loved. In a decision that defied all logic, reason, and self-preservation, Finn slowly reached out his trembling hands. He gently grasped Steffy's shoulders, feeling the violent shudders wrecking her fragile frame. With a profound, ragged exhale that seemed to release the last remnants of his ego, he pulled her up from the floor and enveloped her in a desperate, crushing embrace. Steffy gasped, her hands clutching at his shirt as if he were the only solid object in a collapsing universe, burying her tear-soaked face into his chest. Finn rested his chin on the top of her head, closing his eyes tightly as silent tears of his own finally fell, mapping the contours of his devastating sacrifice. "I've got you," Finn whispered, his voice thick with emotion but laced with a sudden, unbreakable resolve. "I am here, Steffy. I am not going anywhere." He pulled back just enough to force her to look into his eyes, ensuring she understood the absolute gravity of the vow he was about to make. "This baby," he said, his voice steadying, his gaze dropping momentarily to her stomach before rising to meet her terrified eyes again. "This baby is ours. Do you hear me? It is a Finnegan. I am the father. We are going to build a wall around this family, and we are never, ever going to let the past tear it down." Steffy stared at him in sheer, unadulterated disbelief, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She had expected rage, disgust, abandonment. Instead, she was being offered a grace so profound, so entirely unmerited, that it felt like a physical weight pressing down on her chest. Finn was choosing to swallow his pride, to absorb the toxic fallout of her catastrophic mistake, and to raise the child of the man she had slept with, all to keep their family intact. It was an act of unconditional love so monumental that it completely redefined the boundaries of their marriage. However, this beautiful, terrifying sacrifice birthed an entirely new set of harrowing complications. By claiming this child as his own, Finn was committing to a lifetime of deception. They would have to lie to everyone they loved. They would have to look Taylor Hayes, Rich Forrester, and the entire Forrester-Logan Spencer dynasty in the eye, and pretend this child was a product of their reconciliation, not the physical manifestation of Steffy's infidelity. The logistics of the lie were staggering, requiring a level of constant, vigilant deceit that neither of them had ever practiced. Every ultrasound, every doctor's appointment, every milestone would be shadowed by the ghost of Carter Walton. And then there was the looming, inescapable threat of Carter himself. Carter was not a stranger living in a distant city. He was the chief operating officer of Forrester Creations, a man Steffy worked with every single day. He was a man drowning in his own guilt, desperately trying to repair his marriage to Daphne while burying his feelings for Steffy. How long could Steffy look at Carter across a boardroom table, knowing she was carrying his biological child, without cracking under the pressure? How long could Finn stand in the same room as the man who had slept with his wife, smiling and shaking his hand, while secretly raising his son or daughter? The proximity of the biological father turned this secret from a dormant lay into a highly volatile, active explosive. Furthermore, Finn's heroic decision carried a dark, psychological toll that he was only beginning to comprehend. Could a man truly raise another man's child, born from the ultimate betrayal, without a seed of resentment festering deep within his soul? Every time he looked at the child, would he see Carter's features? Would the child be a constant, living reminder of the night his wife sought comfort in the arms of another? Finn was essentially agreeing to swallow poison every single day to keep Steffy from dying of the same venom. It was a noble gesture, but one that threatened to slowly erode his own mental and emotional well-being over the years to come. There was also a profound, tragic irony in Finn's choice that echoed the darkest chapters of his own life story. Finn himself was the product of an affair, a biological secret kept hidden by his adoptive mother, Lee, and his biological father, Jack. Jack had lied to Lee for decades, bringing his illegitimate child into their home under the guise of adoption, forcing Lee to unknowingly raise the product of his infidelity with Sheila Carter. Finn had experienced firsthand the apocalyptic devastation that such a secret causes when it finally comes to light. He knew the trauma of discovering that your entire identity, your entire family structure, was built on a foundation of lies. Yet, here he was, actively choosing to perpetuate the exact same cycle of deception, willingly stepping into a role that mirrored the very betrayals that had traumatized his own family. As Finn held a sobbing, grateful Steffy in his arms, the ocean continued to crash against the cliffs outside, indifferent to the monumental shift that had just occurred within those walls. The sin marriage had survived the immediate impact of the confession, saved by a man's extraordinary capacity for forgiveness and his primal instinct to protect his pack. But the foundation of their relationship was now built on a fault line of massive, dangerous secrets. Finn had chosen to embrace the child of his wife's lover to save their family, but the question remained, would this ultimate act of sacrifice be the salvation that truly healed their fractured souls? Or was it merely the tragic prologue to an even more devastating, unavoidable explosion in the future? Only time would reveal if love could truly conquer a lie of this magnitude, or if the truth, as it always does in Los Angeles, would eventually claw its way to the surface and destroy them all.